One of the best things in Sonic is the incredible transformation Sonic gets when collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds, turning into the golden super form known as Super Sonic. And while this form does look great, it's not just for show, as this form is usually only used in the most dire of situations where Sonic or the others need a boost to save the day. This also makes for some great story moments, but also incredible gameplay where it really feels like the game is rewarding you for reaching the end of the game. But Sonic isn't the only character to achieve this super form, and hell, Super Sonic isn't even the only super transformation Sonic has performed. So of course the question arises, of all the super transformations, which is the best and my favorite of them? So I threw them all in a tier list, and we're gonna find that answer today. The only rules I have is, much like the other ranking videos that I've made, I won't be showcasing any mobile versions or anything with Speed Simulator, as there isn't too much to say about them other than them making an appearance in those games. However, I do typically try to avoid basing it off of gameplay. But with gameplay being such a huge part of these super transformations, I will be basing some of my ranking based on how the gameplay performed in each of its respected games. But with all that out of the way, let's rank some super forms. Of course, kicking things off is going to be the first Super Sonic appearance in Sonic 2. While this version of Super Sonic doesn't really add anything to the story of the game and is more of a reward for players for completing each of the special stages, after doing so, you can use him in gameplay after achieving 50 rings, allowing you to become faster and have invincibility. But you can still die if you were to be pinched or falling down a bottomless pit. I will say, and I don't know if this is a hot take at all, but I actually have always preferred the Super Sonic sprite in Sonic 2 over Sonic 3's Super Sonic sprite. To me, it always just looked more fitting and cooler looking for Sonic. But you can let me know in the comments below if you like Sonic 3 or Sonic 2's sprite better. But there is somewhat of a reward for the ending of the game, as while it might not be a part of the final boss, it does look like Super Sonic will fall from the sky at the end of the game with Tails picking him up on the tornado. It is a bit weird that he only transforms after the final boss and not during it, but it does give a really badass shot of Super Sonic at the end of the game. For being the first appearance, the super form sets a great tone of the form, for having huge potential for something greater later on down the road. But it does still lack having a true purpose outside of being a special stage reward, and I think B rank is a great spot for Sonic 2. Following, of course, is the sequel in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, where we start off right away with an opening cutscene of Sonic turning super and heading into Angel Island, just for him moments later having the emeralds punched out of him by Knuckles. I mean, sure, back in 1994, it probably didn't strike people as this moment being that crazy. But fast forwarding today, this moment is pretty crazy considering how much we know about Super Sonic and Knuckles as a character now. I do somewhat wish that Sega would go into a bit more depth about this. Like, is Knuckles physically stronger than Super, or just as strong, or does Super Sonic have some type of weakness that we don't know about? It's of course one of the most iconic moments in the classic games, and honestly the best intro for a classic game in my opinion. But you know, if some reporter or interviewer is watching this by some chance, if you get the chance to meet Iizuka or someone higher up in Sega, ask him about this moment, because I'd love to know what exactly is going on here, because it's never been answered before. But anyway, in Sonic 3, Sonic must go around collecting all 7 emeralds through special stages that are hidden throughout each stage. After doing each special stage, you will be able to turn super after collecting 50 rings, acting pretty identical to Sonic 2. However, like I was saying before, his sprite is slightly different, and while I do think that both the sprites do ultimately look good, I just do prefer the Sonic 2 sprite. But what this Super Sonic has over Sonic 2 is he's actually involved in the ending of the game, unlike Sonic 2. While Sonic 3 and Knuckles does have a few different endings depending on your progression of the emeralds in the game, Super Sonic does have a ending, where he fights the Death Egg robot in space in a super cool final boss, and then proceeds to return the Master Emerald to Angel Island. While this isn't my personal favorite ending of Sonic 3, it is a great one for sure, but I think this is another B rank. However, I will rate this a little bit higher than Sonic 2. As I do like the sprite better in Sonic 2, I however do like that this actually has an ending and a final boss. I feel like Super Sonic was handled quite better in Sonic 3. But I do think that we should get a reason on the Knuckles situation, and this isn't even the best super form in the game. And that's because Hyper Sonic exists in this game, making his only appearance ever in Sonic, which is a damn shame. But after collecting all the Chaos Emeralds before reaching Mushroom Hill Zone, you'll encounter Rainbow Big Rings, where you then are teleported to the Shrine of the Super Emeralds, where you must complete more special stages and acquire all 7 Super Emeralds. But once collecting them and gaining 50 rings, you can become the rainbow flashing god that is Hyper Sonic. I mean, come on, you can't tell me that Sonic flashing all these colors while becoming faster, being able to breathe underwater, and having an attack that clears any enemy in his path isn't badass. This is by far the strongest and most overpowered Sonic has ever been, and just makes any boss an absolute breeze. And I would love to see Hyper return someday. Unfortunately, Sega has stated a few times on a few reasons why he will never return, like the proneness to seizures, or that the Super Emeralds reside in another dimension where Sonic is never able to get them again. While it's pretty unlikely that these will ever come back, a guy can dream. But this is easily an A rank for me. Next being the fighting classic in Sonic the Fighters, where Super Sonic is technically the only unlockable character in the game, but is only able to be used after a certain amount of requirements have been made. Those being that you're not allowed to lose a single round and you must survive one round with Metal Sonic. Where then if you enter Hyper Mode, you end up transforming into Super Sonic, where this basically turns Sonic into an extremely fast, nearly invincible version of himself, where he can use any move without risk and never loses Hyper Mode. While he can be punched and even knocked back, this does little to no damage to Sonic, where it would take your opponent forever to win, but there is also a time limit, so good luck with that. The unfortunate part of this Super Sonic is he is only ever used in the last round versus Metal Sonic in the extremely short fight with Eggman. And that's the only time that you can ever use Super Sonic in the game. It's a really cool Easter egg in the game, as it's definitely something that you can miss out on if you don't meet those requirements, but I do wish that you could unlock him to use him whenever you feel like it. But I'll at least put him in C rank. Switching things over to our first racing title in Sonic R, where Super Sonic is once again an unlockable character, but unlike Fighters, he is a permanent part of your roster once you unlock him. But after obtaining every Chaos Emerald hidden amongst the 4 main tracks, you will unlock the 5th and final track in Radiant Emerald, where then if you press up on Sonic in the character select screen, you will see Super Sonic come down as a playable character. It's kind of funny because if you never pressed up on Sonic, you actually would never see Super Sonic as a playable character that you can choose from. But you know, this dude deserves to be locked away because of how absolutely criminally good he is. He is by far the fastest character in the game and also keeps Sonic's double jump, and is literally Jesus the Hedgehog where he can walk on water. There is nothing you can do to stop Super Sonic in Sonic R, and even when the CPU finally gets their chance to use him if you select a different character, it's actually hard to compete with him at times. If you ever come across Super Sonic in Reactive Factory, his CPU actually is programmed to take shortcuts you didn't even know were possible. While it is just a racing game, Sonic R is a great take on Super Sonic, showing just how strong and broken he can be as a character, even when he's not fighting Eggman and saving the world. So I think this is another B rank. And oh man, we have made it to the adventure games, where Super Sonic just reaches a whole new level of cool. In Adventure, the main antagonist, Chaos, absorbs all the emeralds and takes every piece of negative energy, and ends up spitting out each of the dried up and colorless Chaos Emeralds, making it feel as if all hope is lost and the world is doomed. Even Eggman can't control his water beast anymore. But Sonic takes the emeralds and uses the positive energy of the emeralds, with the people of Station Square screaming Sonic's name.
Go Sonic! Yeah, Sonic!
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 Negative forces aren't the only way to empower the Chaos Emeralds.
It makes the battle feel so cool, and it's a do or die for Sonic and the world. And also, Super Sonic's quills are just goated in the adventure games. I don't know why they ever changed it. I mean, Super looks good now, but the adventure quills look so good for Sonic. And going into battle with the crowd chanting Sonic, the incredible adventure look alongside Open Your Heart blasting, oh my god, this goes so damn hard. But in this battle, Sonic flies across water looking to dive into perfect chaos and swim up, hitting him on top of his head where his weak spot is, and eventually being able to save the day by defeating Chaos. And to this point, this was the best Super Sonic appearance, and it wasn't even close. And this is an easy A rank, but it is tough not putting this above Hyper. You know what? Hypersonic is amazing, and the idea of him is great. But you can't top the look, the flying on the water, the chants, and Open Your Heart. To the top of A he goes. Next is the often forgotten Sonic Shuffle. What's pretty crazy is Super Sonic is a whole separate character from Sonic and is a playable character who can be unlocked in in-game purchases. Super Sonic is somewhat similar looking to his Adventure Dreamcast look, but is a bit sharper looking, and to be honest, looks somewhat lifeless. I like the idea of having him in the game, and also some of the funny outfits he gets, like the cowboy fit, but I think C rank is a good spot for Shuffle. But next is the extremely popular fan favorite in Sonic Adventure 2, where Super Sonic appears at the end of the game. When all the emeralds are gathered at the Master Emerald altar, where himself and Shadow go super for making one of the most iconic super transformations in history of not having one, but two Super Hedgehogs. I wanted to go in order by character on this list with doing all the Sonic transformations and going Tails, Knuckles, Shadow, and so on and so forth. But you can't talk about Super Sonic in Adventure 2 without talking about Super Shadow in Sonic Adventure 2. If I could show you one scene that has rewired my brain from my childhood, it's this one. Of these two shaking their fists, going super, blasting off to the final battle of Final Hazard, and fighting in space while the space colony Ark is plummeting down to Earth. With not only the amazing look of the Super Hedgehogs, but also Live and Learn blasting while Sonic and Shadow talk back and forth. These two teaming up and battling for the first time in their super forms would create a Sonic fan for life in me. And I absolutely adore every single moment of this fight. While Perfect Chaos is amazing as well, I've always preferred the look and controls of flying in space with Sonic Adventure 2. And it is without a doubt a top of A rank for both Hedgehogs, but I'll put Super Shadow above Sonic because, come on, the ultimate sacrifice and he's the ultimate freaking life form. Next is the Advanced Trilogy, where like the classics you must collect all the emeralds in special stages to unlock the supersonic ending of the game. And while I know I'm not ranking special stages, let me just say the Advance 1 special stage is hot garbage. It is so hard to collect these damn rings in these stages, and is the sole reason on why whenever I go back to this game, I don't go for the supersonic ending. I just don't even want to think or even do these at all, ever again. But there is a redeeming quality as Sonic Advance 2 and 3 are a little bit better when it comes to special stages, so. But the final boss is where Super Sonic is featured in each of the games and looks the same amongst the three games. I have always really enjoyed all of the Advance sprites, and Super Sonic is no different. Advance 1 and 2's fights are pretty similar, where it's a fairly short fight of Sonic boosting at Eggman and hitting him. Not to say these fights are bad or anything, but they aren't super exciting, especially comparing it to Advance 3's, where Super Sonic takes on another super form in Ultimate Gemerl, where he transforms himself into a circular looking thing with super long arms. What's also really cool is this is one of the only times Super Sonic teams up with Eggman or both are playable at the same time. But Super Sonic will charge up Eggman and throw him at Gemerl to open up his weak spot, allowing Sonic to slam into it. I love this fight, and it is my favorite of the three games, and I would love to see Eggman more involved in the final bosses and potentially even being playable in them again. Ultimate Gemerl is a cool idea, but he just looks really odd looking. And I wish we just got a little bit more from Ultimate Gemerl. But I will say that his super extended arm attacks are pretty cool looking. But overall, it's a pretty lackluster super form, so I'll put Sonic in B and Gemerl in C. Alright, now it's time to
Show that creep the real superpower of teamwork!
with Sonic Heroes, where Team Sonic takes on Metal Overlord, where like most games, the final boss is earned through collecting the emeralds in special stages. This boss fight is super fun, where you fight Metal in the sky with Team Sonic, where Sonic not only does his super transformation, but Tails and Knuckles do as well. Well, kind of. While it is very cool that Tails and Knuckles get some spotlight in the final boss of the game, I do think that their super forms, or whatever you want to call these super bubbles, could have been treated much better. Where instead of having the classic look of Knuckles being pink or Tails being a lighter color with his flickies, they just get this odd looking golden bubble around them. Which, to be honest, is just pretty lame. Like, this had so much potential to be something so cool and arguably one of the best moments, if not the best moment, of Team Sonic. I know some might argue, well, it's their hyperforms that look different. But like, why do all the hedgehogs get cool golden forms, and why not just have them become golden, or like have Knuckles become like a rose gold color and just have Tails be lighter? But I digress. But this is the first game to really make Super Sonic's quills go back up like his classic look. But in this fight, you can switch between each character of Team Sonic. While that seems cool, the fight is pretty simple, and the moveset of the characters is pretty similar to that of the rest of the game. At least every time that I've played Metal Overlord, I've just used Tails and threw Sonic and Knuckles at Metal till I got the Team Blast, and that was about it. The fight is cool, Metal Overlord is a really cool looking boss, but the fight overall for sure could have been better gameplay-wise. At least in my opinion. Of course, there is obviously bonus points for what I made of being arguably the best boss theme of all time in any video game. But ranking them, I'll put Sonic in B and Tails and Knuckles in D rank. On to the next racing titles in Sonic Riders, where in all 3 games, Super Sonic is an unlockable character after completing missions in the game, where in each game he runs off of rings instead of air. In the first game, he'll start out with 30 rings, but when you run out of rings, Sonic is forced to run and de-transforms into his base form. But the really cool thing about this Super Sonic is that he ends up gaining the flying and power abilities to use on the track while keeping his speed type, making him to have each of the abilities that are offered in the game. And whenever he performs any of these moves, he'll stop using rings for a bit. So it's nice to definitely be utilizing all of those while you're in the race if you want to make Super Sonic last. It also helps that this ends up being the fastest character by far in the game. However, in Zero Gravity, this dude guzzles rings faster than Joey Chestnut eats hot dogs on the 4th of July. Because not only does he start with 0 rings, forcing you to run at the start of the race, but whenever you use the Arc of the Cosmos or Boost, you might as well kiss all of your rings goodbye. Super Sonic is really cool to add, but to do all the missions and have to get a gold rank to unlock him just for him to slam all your rings in a second is a bit disappointing. But this was changed in Free Riders. While I can't say I really enjoyed much about Free Riders, Sonic will start the race normal on his board, and then when acquiring 30 rings while racing, he'll transform into Super Sonic. The really nice thing about this is he'll only lose rings when boosting, so it's pretty easy to keep Super Sonic throughout the entire race if you want to. But while that's great and all, it doesn't really save the gameplay of Free Riders at all, but I think C rank is a good spot for Sonic Riders. Going into the next handheld series in the Sonic Rush series, where both games feature super endings and 2 characters going into their super forms after unlocking the end of the game and completing both games' special stages / missions. Where then Sonic and Blaze transform into Super Sonic and the newly introduced Burning Blaze, who instead of using the Chaos Emeralds uses the Soul Emeralds of her dimension to go into this form. And Burning Blaze is awesome, and I love the design, the power, and her having her own set of powers. I have always wondered what Burning Sonic or even Silver would look like considering her relationship later on with Silver, and even their flaming world caused by Iblis, but not to get too off topic. Sonic also for some reason goes back to his adventure super look, which in Rush looks really good, and I've always really loved that design for him in Rush. But in both games, Sonic and Blaze take on Eggman and Eggman N, where in the first game they take on the Egg Salamander, which is a really fun fight. And it truly feels like a perfected version of the Sonic Advance boss fights. And in Sonic Rush Adventure, they take on another great boss fight in the Egg Wizard, who is arguably one of Eggman's best creations, and this fight has more of a 3D take on the fight. But Sonic and Blaze must deflect spells back at the Egg Wizard shooting out of his staff. These fights are both great. And it also helps that Sonic and Blaze transformations look amazing in this, and of course Wrapped in Black is an amazing song choice for the Egg Salamander fight. The Rush series just has something about it that is so stylish and so fitting for Sonic and Blaze. But overall, I think Sonic Rush is easily A rank for both Burning Blaze and Super Sonic. Next up is Sonic 06, where the final boss is up against the sun god Solaris, where we see this game feature all 3 of the Super Hedgehogs in Sonic, Shadow, and Silver, where Sonic is turned super with the kiss of Princess Elise. Okay, I'm obviously being sarcastic, and I know that we kind of like to somewhat gloss over this scene and kind of act like it never happens, and I like to do that a lot in my videos as well. The scene overall is just probably one of the worst and one of the most awkward scenes in the entire series. But why did this girl feel the need to kiss him? Like, we all know that it was the power of the emeralds that revived Sonic. And it's also weird considering Sonic is literally dead at this point. So she's literally kissing the corpse of a dead blue hedgehog, which makes it even more weird if you think about it. But moving on, within the game, Sonic dies after getting blindsided by Mephiles to make Elise cry, where it then reunites him with Iblis where they can become a Solaris, where we then see all of Sonic's friends go out and find all the Chaos Emeralds to revive Sonic with them. But when reviving him, Sonic ends up going super and also sharing his power much like Heroes to Shadow and Silver, thus creating Super Shadow and Super Silver in the game. But get this, they actually glow golden and go super instead of turning into golden bubbles. Alright, I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse with the golden bubbles, but these 3 are so effing cool. This game not only features a really cool fight with the 3 of them having unique abilities, a purpose to use all 3 of them, and an incredible remix of his world, but also a really cool god final boss. But when we get to the second phase of the fight, the voice lines that are said from each of the hedgehogs might be the rawest lines of the entire series. Just listen to some of these.
I'll release you from the chains of your past.
I will protect the future.
The present day, the here and now that you've stolen, time to take it back.
Like, you actually get so hyped to beat the absolute mess out of Solaris after hearing these three go off. These three are so cool, and everything about these versions of them are so cool and easily an A rank for me. Next is a bit of a change of pace of being super hype against Solaris to now playing tennis. Where in Sega Superstars Tennis, this game features ultimate moves, where if you fill up your gauge that is below each of your character's feet, they'll end up activating an ultimate move in the game. And once it's activated, of course, Sonic and Shadow's ultimate move is going to be them transforming into their super forms. This only lasts for a brief period of time, but in the game this ends up making their shots harder to hit, with even Shadow teleporting his opponent if they end up hitting the ball while he's in his super form. And that's really about it. I mean, I will say that they do look a bit off to me as well, where these super forms look a bit lifeless, but what can you really expect from a tennis game? So I'll put these both in D rank, but I'll put Shadow above Sonic since the teleporting thing is kind of cool. Moving into the first installment of the storybook series in Sonic and the Secret Rings. What was really special about these games is they were not only super unique for Sonic, but they also took a chance on giving us an entirely new super form in DarkSpine Sonic, where Sonic consumes the Rage, Sadness, and Hatred world rings in the game, after the newly transformed version of Eraser Jin named Alpha Layla Walela ejects these world rings, allowing Sonic to consume them. Sonic himself is already pretty pissed off at this point, after his companion the whole game, Shara, sacrifices herself to keep Sonic alive. And now you're gonna add Rage, Sadness, and Hatred world rings into the mix. We see a whole new side of Sonic that we rarely ever see in the series. We see a more angry and aggressive side to Sonic. And honestly, when Sonic gets serious and upset, this makes for some of Sonic's most raw moments, like this line right here.
If this is your world, then it's a world that I don't want any part of.
Like, these moments in the storybook games make some of Jason Griffith's best moments as Sonic. But with this form, we see Sonic fight a lot more savagely, where he will punch the hell out of Eraser for attacks. And one of the cooler powers that he ends up gaining in this form is pyrokinesis, giving us a glimpse of what maybe burning Sonic would look like, kinda like that I mentioned in my Rush ranking. This form also has a really cool looking design, with Sonic becoming purple and having two white racing stripes down his head. While I do think overall Super Sonic does look better, DarkSpine still looks really badass and overall is an amazing transformation and fight. So this is easily another A rank for me. Next up is the Nintendo fighting game in Super Smash Bros., where Sonic has made 3 appearances now in Smash Brawl, 4, and Ultimate. But within each of these games, there is a special item called a Smash Ball that allows characters to release a special attack. And of course, Sonic's is Super Sonic. Where in Brawl, Super Sonic is controlled by the player and can freely move around, making one of the most broken final smashes. And I've always really liked the look of Brawl Sonic, where it was more of a unique look for him. And Super Sonic is just super shiny and bright. That just kind of gives him a really cool special effect for the game. But in Smash 4 and Ultimate, they are pretty much a carbon copy of each other, where Sonic isn't controlled nearly as much. Besides pressing up and down, that's really all that you do with Sonic, where he's dashing left and right across the screen hitting players. This isn't nearly as broken as it was in Brawl, but it's still a really good final smash. And Sonic looks good in Smash 4 and Ultimate, I just do prefer his look a little bit more in Brawl, being a little bit more unique and really fitting to the game. But I still think that Smash is a C rank for me. Next is the fan favorite in Sonic Unleashed, where Super Sonic first appears in what I think is the greatest cutscene of all time. In the intro of the game, Sonic ends up getting captured by Eggman and ends up popping out the Chaos Emeralds to go super, this destroying the arms that Sonic is trapped in and also leaves Eggman in fear and causes him to run away. But all of this is just a part of Eggman's plot to trap Sonic. I do, however, love the way that Super Sonic looks in this. He looks super well done and just how confident he sounds alongside just ripping apart Eggman's space fleet. But Eggman does trap Sonic again and ends up knocking out all of the emeralds of him, transforming him back into his base form and then turning him into the Werehog. We don't see Super Sonic until the final battle versus Dark Gaia, where after restoring all the Chaos Emeralds, Sonic and Chip take on this big creature where Dark Gaia transforms into Perfect Dark Gaia, where Chip gives Sonic the Emeralds to help him fight, allowing him to transform once again. I have always found this fight really fun gameplay-wise, where I feel like this is where Generations should have taken more inspiration from for the Time Eater fight, where it feels very similar to that of the normal boost gameplay that you're used to in the main game, where you're still moving at a fast speed and still being able to move in 3D. I will say my biggest complaint with the fight is just how short Super Sonic's part of the fight is. I don't super enjoy the first phase of the fight with Chip, but I really do enjoy the Super Sonic part of it. But this is also probably the best Super Sonic has probably ever looked, as well as the renders and the art direction of the Super Sonic. And I'm not trying to be that guy, but his quills look amazing in this form. And the remix battle theme of Endless Possibilities is really good. This really gives it a big fight feel to the fight, along with Sonic after the fight being drained and knocked out, showing just how big of a battle this was. I mean, this was a monster that accomplished ruling the entire world more than Eggman ever has to this point. So without a doubt, this is an easy A rank once again. On to the next storybook game in Sonic and the Black Knight. This game overall is heavily underrated in my opinion. And I think the same can be said for a super transformation in Excalibur Sonic, where after being betrayed by Merlina, your companion for majority of the game, Sonic looks to stop her from making the world eternal. When Sonic seems backed into a corner and even having his sword broken in half, the long-lost light of the sacred swords appears in front of the Knights of the Round Table, where they then enter each of their swords. This then allows Sonic to gain a golden suit of armor that is also known as Excalibur Sonic. And this design is just so beautiful and is the perfect way to write an ending to this game. The sick cutscene, the armor slapping onto him, the golden armor, the red cape, the upgraded sword, all of it is so good. This form also gives Sonic the ability of flight, increased strength, and a huge boost in his swordsmanship. And the final blow of Sonic using his Soul Surge is so pretty and badass looking. I think just the design alone is an A rank, but adding everything else solidifies that ranking for me. Into the next game in the DS family of Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood, where Super Sonic makes a brief appearance at the end of the game where Sonic transforms after fighting a fellow super form in Imperator IX, where he transforms using the Chaos Emerald energy in Nocturne. But Sonic goes super and becomes playable just for the final boss fight. In this fight, he never loses health and easily defeats Imperator IX. This is an extremely short fight, and it kind of feels like Sega just added Super Sonic just to be like, here you go, here's a Super Sonic ending. It's just really brief and short, and his game model is, interesting to say the least. I'm gonna put both of these in D rank. Next is the racing title in Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, where each character has an all-star move very similar to that of the tennis game. But in this, they gain it from an item box, and it's usually given to the racer who falls behind in the race. But this game features two super formers where both Sonic and Shadow will gain Chaos Emeralds as their all-star. This allows them to transform, leaving their vehicles behind for a moment and blow through any other racers in their path. Once they're in their super forms, you can also press the action button to make Sonic boost, or what's even cooler is Shadow will throw Chaos Spears at other racers. Both of these are another short appearance, but it does really feel special when you end up getting this item and is a really cool moment in the race. But I'll put both of them at least in C rank, but I'll put Shadow above Sonic. Next is Sonic 4 Episode 1 and 2, where unfortunately Super Sonic doesn't have a cool final boss like Sonic 3 or Mania, but is still able to be used in gameplay, where after completing all the special stages and gaining 50 rings, he works almost identical to how Super Sonic is in Sonic 3. But for some reason, he feels just so fast. I'm not complaining, as it is really fun to see just how fast you can get through these stages with Super Sonic, and of course makes the boss fights easy as hell. He just feels extremely fast for some reason to me. But his design looks fine, nothing too different to this point, but man, does this theme that plays when using him, I can do without it. I kind of wish that we would just get rid of the trend of using themes for when Super Sonic transforms. That is in classic style games, I should say. Themes like Live and Learn, Open Your Heart, Undefeatable are obviously amazing. But hearing this constantly just makes my ears bleed. But I'll at least give him a C rank. Next is Sonic Colors, where in the console version of the game, Super Sonic is seen as an unlockable bonus for 100%ing the game, where after obtaining all the red star rings and beating every level of Game Land, you can then go into any stage and activate Super Sonic with 50 rings. But what's kind of funny is in Sonic Colors DS, Sonic actually has a Super Sonic ending and a final boss with Super Sonic, unlike its console brother, where Super Sonic will take on Mother Wisp, who has been corrupted, where Super Sonic actually looks quite similar to his Rush version, with having more of an adventure look to his quills, but also having a 3D boss fight like Rush. With having more of an adventure look in his quills, but also having a 3D boss fight that looks a lot like Rush Adventure. This boss fight is a pretty cool ending to the DS version of the game, but I wish they did something like this for the console version as well. I don't think that every single game needs Super Sonic for a fight in the final boss, but a lot of the best boss fights in the entire series come with super forms. There are definitely some games like Shadow Generations that prove that point wrong, but I will say a lot of good fights like Sonic Frontiers have really good boss fights because of the super transformation and the abilities that Super Sonic has. I will say that Super Sonic does also look similar to his Unleashed look in the console version. It just kind of seems like Sonic is a lighter yellow and also seems kind of pale. But maybe that's just me, but I'll give Colors a C rank. Next is the 20th anniversary title in Sonic Generations, where Super Sonic appears at the end of the game for the final boss in the Time Eater, but also as an unlockable skill in the game after completing the story of the game. I touched on it very slightly in my Unleashed ranking, but I don't think that the Time Eater fight is super good. If anything, it just kind of feels somewhat of a chore to do in a playthrough of the game. 1, you hold boost till you finally hit him, and that's about it. But 2, if he happens to switch to 2D for Classic Sonic section of the super fight, good luck ever hitting him. I think I've hit him maybe once, maybe twice in 2D ever out of all the times that I've played this fight. This fight is just really disappointing considering all the potential it had with having 2 Super Sonics. But also, the other bosses and rival fights in the game are really good. It's pretty crazy to think that the worst boss fight in the game is the final boss. I will say I do really enjoy the skill option that you get after defeating the Time Eater, where Super Sonic feels really broken, but also is being able to be used in modern and classic stages, after gaining 50 rings and pressing Y or triangle. Classic I wouldn't say has a huge change. He is a little bit faster, invincible, jumps higher, and makes spin dash more broken. But modern Sonic is really fun, because when turning into Super Sonic and boosting, you go into autopilot, where Sonic will take over and just fly through the stage however he wants. Which some might argue, well, you're just pressing boost and watching Sonic fly, what's so fun about that? But I feel like that this is how Super Sonic should feel in stages, is super broken. Like, he isn't following the rules of the stage and just says, F it, I'm Super Sonic and I do what I want. But unfortunately, Sonic once again is just a huge ring guzzler when turning into Super Sonic, because boosting in Super Sonic, good luck going super far. He will drain your rings so fast, and sure, there's mods that fix this, but I'm not taking into account for mods. I will say I've always liked what Sonic Forces did with Super Sonic's gameplay for modern Sonic. While I'll get more into Forces in a bit, but Super Sonic when boosting doesn't lose rings like crazy. But also, whenever you use Super Sonic, it also doesn't go towards your personal best time in each of the stages. If I opt into Super Sonic, I want to feel broken. I don't want to feel limited to only just having him for 5 seconds of boosting. And to be honest, it's really hard to rank this anywhere other than D rank. Like, the potential was there so heavily, but it just didn't execute. But I'll put modern at least higher than classic. Next is Sonic Lost World, where once again, like Colors, is a reward bonus for collecting all the red star rings in each stage. While Super Sonic isn't nearly as disappointing as he was in Generations, Super Sonic isn't super different from Sonic himself in the game, other than being faster and having a boost instead of a spin dash. Which I think that the boost is a really good replacement for Super Sonic and genuinely makes him feel a bit more broken, which I like, but it ultimately just doesn't make him that different. I will say, however, though, I do like that it is easy to maintain Super Sonic in this game, unlike Generations. But it does seem a little half-baked for Super Sonic, but I can't complain. It's better than most of the games around this time. His model looks fine, but sometimes while wall running or doing anything that's kind of like a short cutscene in the stage, like jumping off the big springs, you'll see Sonic revert back to his normal form, but still stay golden. So if you've ever wondered what Super Sonic looks like with his quills down, well, there you go. It's pretty funny looking, and honestly, I can't complain too much. It's not really something that affects me that much. But I think the right place for Lost World is another C rank. Now on to Sonic Forces, which I did talk about a bit already in Generations. But let me just say, making this a paid DLC was absolutely insanity. Like, you're gonna charge fans $2 for something that has always been included in the games? It's just absolutely crazy to think. Like, who in their right mind would ever pay that just to play as Super Sonic? Thankfully, Sega did end up changing it to a free DLC later on after seeing all the criticism behind it, but still crazy that this was a reality for a second. Super Sonic does the same, but like I was saying in Generations, I like that he doesn't lose rings super fast after transforming. And he also doesn't affect your personal best time when using him. Instead, he'll just leave your time blank. As I really like keeping my personal best times for each stages in Generations and in Forces if I ever decide to go back and play a lot of those stages, to having times that don't feature Super Sonic. And Super Sonic, in a way, if you do have him for a long time, just does kind of feel like you're cheating in a way. But in Forces, he doesn't have the autopilot that he did in Generations. Instead, it's just a faster boost and somewhat like Lost World. And Classic Sonic is the same as Generations, he just now has the drop dash that is a bit faster. I think just the idea of Sega thinking that they could get away with making $2 off of everyone for Super Sonic is still a bit crazy to me, but also considering that Sega wanted this game to be darker and even having Eggman take over completely and not using the Chaos Emeralds or any super forms for that matter is also kind of crazy that he was never featured in a final boss or any boss at all for that matter. Or like a secret final boss at the end of the game where Sonic ends up fighting Infinite, or I don't know. It's pretty crazy to think that Sonic Forces had nothing to do with the Chaos Emeralds and it was completely focused on the Phantom Ruby. But this is a D rank for me. Finally moving into something a bit better in Sonic Mania, where you must collect all the emeralds in special stages for each of the playable characters in the game. And after obtaining 50 rings, you can transform into the super form of Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Mighty, or Ray. While Sonic is the only one to really look different when going super, I do like that at least every playable character does have the ability to go super in Mania. For the other playable characters, they just basically flash a lighter color for a second, but I will say that I have always really enjoyed the after images that each character gets when going super. It's a really nice touch, and I think it's something that they should definitely keep in the classic games for super forms. I would say that everyone that isn't Sonic would be a C rank, but none of them being in a particular order in my opinion. But Sonic, on the other hand, looks great in the game, and I absolutely love the Super Sonic sprite for Mania. But also the flying animation, the shaking on the ground when you drop dash, and also the final boss are all great for Super Sonic. Where in the final boss he goes up against Eggman and Heavy King, who are fighting over the Phantom Ruby in the boss. This boss is pretty easy in my opinion, but I do really like it as a final boss and is probably my favorite classic final boss. I think this or Sonic 3 for sure. But I like that this leads to the story of Sonic Forces, and while I can't say that I like the Forces story, I do really like that Mania is tied into it somehow. And with that, I think Super Sonic in Mania is an A rank. Next being the last game for Sonic in Sonic Superstars, where each playable character has a super form, but Sonic and Trip being the only characters to have transformations, where Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and any of the skins just flash a bit of a lighter color when in their super forms. Like I've already said, it's cool that they can go super. I really don't like that they can't have their own super transformations. It just feels a bit lazy to me. I get maybe not giving the skin options like the Lego skin super forms, but I think the main playable characters of Tails, Knuckles, and Amy can all get their own super forms. Give Knuckles the hyper look, give Amy her own rose gold or even a yellow super form like any of the other hedgehogs, and give Tails his flickies back. It just is something that I feel like really wouldn't take that long for them to add into the game, considering that they added an entire dragon for Trip. But with that being said, I'll put all 4 of those of Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and the skins in D rank. But Sonic, however, does have his super form like the other games, where once again you must complete special stages to get all the emeralds and can transform after collecting 50 rings. Sheesh, I've only said that a few times in this video. But anyways, this game does also feature a final boss that features Super Sonic in it, where Sonic must fight Black Dragon in the boss fight. This boss can definitely be quite annoying and hard at times, and the boss is decently long as well. I don't think this fight is spectacular by any means, but I think that it's decent, and Superstars is definitely known for having its harder boss fights, and I like that for a change in a Sonic game, where everything isn't just super easy for once. So for Sonic, I'll put him in B rank. And for Trip, she has what is possibly the most unique super form in the entire series, where she transforms into a full-blown dragon, which is super cool looking, mind you. And it's awesome to see Sega give a new character a brand new super form. But within the story of the game, Trip only goes super once after Fang steals all the emeralds and bumps into Trip, and once Trip has had enough of Fang's bullying, she takes the emeralds and transforms into a dragon, destroying Fang's mech. Considering you have to unlock Trip's story in the game, I think it would be really cool if Trip somehow had a transformation at the end of her story to fight Fang, or just had the dragon more involved in the final ending against Black Dragon. But it is still really cool that you can use it in gameplay as well, as you can basically fly around endlessly as long as you're in the super form and also breathe fire on enemies, which is really cool. I think Trip is definitely a B rank, and I'll put her at the top of B rank, and could definitely be argued to be put in A. Taking a step away from the games for a bit and going into the shows, first up we have Sonic X. I've always really loved Sonic in Sonic X. His personality, his looks, and of course, the voice acting. Super Sonic makes a few appearances in the show, and I think the most notable moments have to be the adventure adaptations, with his fights against Perfect Chaos and the battle of Super Sonic and Super Shadow vs. Final Hazard. Which each of these fights aren't super long, but I love just how confident both Sonic and Shadow are when they transform into their super forms. Sonic to me has always been someone who is very confident and cocky in his abilities, and I'm glad that he keeps that while transforming into his super form. And Shadow, what's really cool about Shadow is that he'll actually unleash his inhibitor rings while in the super form, which is really cool, and it really shows that Shadow is going all out in this fight. And I wish this is something that they would do more in the games. But in the games, we actually never see a fight between Super Sonic and Super Shadow, but in Sonic X and now Sonic Movie 3, we have. I do think that Sonic 3 does do it a bit better, but it's still really cool that it was originally a thing in Sonic X. But also them teaming up later on against Dark Oak, and when Sonic tries to sacrifice himself, Shadow steps in punching him, letting Sonic live and unleashing his inhibitor rings to save the day, which is probably the most heroic act in the entire series. Both of these super forms are easily A ranks for me, but I'll put Shadow above Sonic. But of course, on the topic of Sonic X, we must mention the short-lived but badass Dark Sonic. Of any form/transformation on this list, this by far, in my opinion, has the most potential of any form. Where in the Meta X saga, when Sonic is exposed to fake Chaos Emeralds and sees Cosmos scared and Chris passed out, Sonic uses the negative energy of the fake emeralds. Alongside being fueled by rage, Sonic transforms into the dark version of Super Sonic known as Dark Sonic. This form, for the 1 minute that we do get it, is so goddamn cool. From Sonic's evil laugh to ripping apart the Meta-X who were designed to test Sonic's strength and speed, taking data from the previous fights in the matter of seconds, is insane. And him just oozing in confidence telling Dark Oak to go back to the drawing board is just so raw. I love seeing more of a dark side to Sonic, and while it's hard to say if this form could ever return considering he used fake emeralds, I would really like to see this form make a return. This is not only a really cool form, but this form is beloved by so many fans, and has been in countless fan-created things like art, animation, and mods. It's pretty crazy to think for just being in a show for 1 minute just how much of an impact he had on the series. Dark Sonic is easily another A rank for me. Moving on to the movies, where we have 3 super transformations. Where in the second we have Sonic turning into Super for the first time in the movies, but we also have Eggman, who I don't know if the name is official, but is known as Emerald Eggman. Out of all the research I did this video, I always found him to be referred to as Emerald Eggman, but someone can correct me in the comments if this is incorrect on his name. But I believe that this is correct. And in movie 3, we once again have Super Sonic again and Super Shadow. But within the second movie, Eggman steals the Master Emerald from under Knuckles and Sonic's nose, transforming into Emerald Eggman, where he gets an emerald green look, but also the power of flight, energy manipulation, teleportation, and technokinesis, basically turning his thoughts into a reality. He can also discharge green energy as lightning bolts, project green lasers, and build anything from energy. I really like the idea, and it's really been a thought in my head since I was a kid, wondering why all of this time Eggman has never used the Chaos Emeralds, and why he doesn't just use them on himself instead of using them in machines. Some people like to theorize that since Eggman is a human, he could never harness the true power of the emeralds, but it seems like he can somewhat in the movie universe, and it makes me really curious what game Eggman would look like with this power. But Emerald Eggman is another A rank. Super Sonic is pretty game-like for the most part, being insanely strong and fast in the second movie. This version of Super Sonic is confident like the others, but I would also say that he appears to almost be more pissed off, with what seems like actually killing Eggman without a second thought in this movie. We obviously learn that this isn't true in movie 3, but he still tried to murder Eggman, which in a way is a bit uncharacteristic for Sonic, but it is pretty characteristic for him to create a chili dog out of thin air. Which again, I wonder if this is just a movie thing, but like, how did he just summon a chili dog out of the thin air? Maybe somebody knows the explanation of that, but it's still a pretty funny moment. But where the form gets really interesting is when he ends up taking on Super Shadow, where I think personally this is one of the coolest fights in the entire series of seeing the two biggest characters fight in their golden god forms. And of course, the legendary dap-up of them teaming up and launching off to live and learn while sitting in a movie theater is truly an unrivaled experience. If I could witness Sonic Movie 3 for the first time again, I would absolutely love to do so. It was such a fun time to be a Sonic fan. And the whole moment of them just absolutely obliterating a bunch of bots in space is probably my favorite moment in the movies. So let's keep the trend of even more A ranks for both of them. Next being the last show in Sonic Prime. While some may argue that this isn't a super transformation, I do think it's worth noting as a transformation that Sonic goes into. With being given the name Shatter Sonic, but I've also heard some people refer to him as Prismatic Sonic, Sonic at first, thanks to 9, uses 3 of the Paradox Prisms, giving Sonic a rainbow outline but also a pretty big speed boost. But when the Prismatic Titan is on his way to destroying Green Hill, Sonic asks 9 to give him more energy, and Sonic now using 4 of them, Sonic has a magenta colored eyes, and definitely becomes more serious taking down the Prismatic Titan. This form, like Dark Sonic, is pretty short-lived, and I like that Prime Sonic actually shuts up for once and takes things seriously. But I am quite surprised that this form wasn't used more later on down the road in the show. But I'll put Shatter Sonic in B rank. Moving on to the comics, and the first up being Archie, where Super Sonic makes a few appearances in different issues. Some of the most notable are definitely his fights versus Hyper Knuckles, Enerjack, and even himself. No, seriously, there is a time where Sonic himself has to fight a clone of Super Sonic. While I'm not going to sit here and go over every Archie appearance, I will say some of the better fights in the series come from Super Sonic. Even in his fights against Enerjack, who is one of the strongest villains in the entire series, Sonic easily avoids and dodges most of Enerjack's attacks. And even seeming like nothing Enerjack does can stop him. Hell, Enerjack even teleports him into the core of Mobius, and that still doesn't stop Super Sonic. And even his fight against Hyper Knuckles is still genuinely really cool to see super forms both fight each other, and is probably the best fight of the early issues. And Super Sonic actually just looks really good in here. I really like the art direction that they decided to go for Super Sonic and Archie. Overall, he's insanely fast and just has so many great moments in the Archie comics, and I think this is a for sure A rank. But on the topic of the Archie comics, while Sonic does go super a handful of times, Sonic's evil counterpart Scourge also goes super once in the comics. While a lot of times it seems as if fans don't like the writing for Scourge in the Archie comics, I will say you can't deny how cool his design is. With the green fur, the biker jacket, and the red sunglasses just was always really cool to me. But when Scourge is cornered in a fight against just about every hedgehog in the series, he runs off to his throne and uses his dimension's version of the Chaos Emeralds known as the Anarchy Barrels to transform into Super Scourge. At the end of the day, Scourge is Sonic from another dimension, who just happened to go evil, so he does share a lot of personality traits that Sonic has. He's just a bit more psycho and crazy about everything. A big comparison that I've seen a lot of people make for Scourge in the Archie comics is actually Joker from the Batman series, and I can for sure see the inspiration there. The Super Scourge rocks an insane looking design with turning purple, having his shades and flames on his jacket change color, and also his eyes turning entirely black with red pupils that makes him straight up look demonic. And while this form had a bunch of potential and a really cool looking design, and it's genuinely a form that I really enjoyed. But while I did enjoy the super form and I really love the design of how he looks in his super form, I will say I don't really like the way that this form loses to Sonic. Where Scourge throughout the entirety of the Archie comics is constantly trying to prove that he belongs, but also that he's just better than Sonic. But when he finally proves himself right, showing that he is better than Sonic and finally defeats him, Sonic says he only won because he went super, and that he couldn't beat him without his super form. This obviously pisses off Scourge, and Scourge replies that he's been stronger than Sonic since day one. And then we have one of the most iconic looking panels inside of the entire Archie comics, is the smug ass panel of Sonic telling him to prove it. So Scourge of course falls for this and then powers down. But when Scourge powers down, he immediately loses all of his energy. And Sonic didn't even have to do anything because he was so drained from using the Anarchy barrels. Like, it's fitting in the sense of just how dumb and full of himself that Scourge is, but I think the potential of having Super Sonic versus Super Scourge would have been way cooler, or just genuinely having Sonic put up a really good fight against him. I just don't love that this is the way that this super cool super form went out, and then was never seen again after this. But like I was saying, I can't deny just how badass his super design was. I just don't like the way that he went out, so I'll put him in B rank. And wrapping up the Archie comics for Sonic is the last super form in Ultra Sonic, where this form only appears a handful of times, but instead of using the Chaos Emerald, Sonic actually taps into the Power Rings to achieve this form, along with Tails actually doing the same thing, being able to transform into his more game-accurate Hyper form. But these forms are extremely powerful, but there is a bit of a catch, as this seems to drain Sonic and Tails of their energy rather quickly. These forms always kind of somewhat reminded me of Super Saiyan 3 and Dragon Ball, where they're extremely strong, it's just they can't maintain these forms for a very long time without draining all their energy. But what's really cool is Sonic ends up using this form again later on thanks to the Super Emeralds, and ends up gaining environmental forms known as Solar, Polar, and Ecosonic, being known as Ultrasonic's alternative forms. But this form makes an appearance one last time in his fight against Noxus, where we learn that Ultrasonic has the ability to open a portal to the Special Zone and ends up sealing Noxus away. It's a pretty big argument on the comic side of the Sonic fandom on whether this form is stronger than Super or not, but many believing it's not due to Ian Flynn stating that Ultra could not beat Enerjack, where Super Sonic had no problem with him for the most part. While this form isn't drastically different looking than Sonic in his base form, I do really like the way that the environmental forms look for Sonic. This transformation that Sonic goes under has a bunch of potential to be really cool, or at least it did, as I don't ever see that this will ever come back. And I wouldn't say that I absolutely love this form, but I'll put Ultrasonic in B rank. And for Hyper Tails, there just isn't a lot about him other than his short appearance that he makes alongside Ultrasonic. I do like that his super/hyper state does gain flickies like he did in the Archie comics, but just for his really brief appearance, I'll put him at least in C rank. On to the next comics in Fleetway, where Super Sonic is seen to be very, very different in this comic series. Where when Sonic transforms into Super Sonic, he becomes pure evil and absolutely ruthless. I mean, just look at the design, those red swirly eyes showing just how much Sonic has lost it, and his fur looking more spiky and rough along with his sharp teeth. But we find out this is what happens when Sonic is exposed to way too much chaos energy. And even when finally transforming down back to Sonic, Sonic says that he doesn't remember anything while being in this super form. But when Sonic is in this form, he ends up just becoming a blood-hungry killer, even trying to kill all of his friends and obliterates Metal Sonic, to where it gets so bad that eventually they have to pull the super energy out of Sonic and send it to the Special Zone. But the problem being now is Sonic and Super Sonic are now completely different people. But just to show how crazy and how much the Sonic has completely lost it inside, he ends up protecting Sonic just to save him for later, in the sense that he can just rip him apart and enjoy ripping him apart later on. But eventually they do end up sealing him away again and end up sending him towards a black asteroid. But Super Sonic does eventually end up escaping, but this also leads to what might be the wildest character development in Sonic history. Because like I said, this Super Sonic version is a psycho, blood-hungry killer. But the Super Sonic actually ends up having a change of heart after the events of this black asteroid. Because after the events of this, he actually ends up losing his power and the memories of Super Sonic, where he then vows to never use his powers again to make sure that he'll never become as evil as he was. But unfortunately for him, there becomes a time where he has the opportunity to save innocent people. So he must use his power, but this ends up snapping him all over again. But thankfully there is a character within the series that is named Ebony that has magical powers to be able to turn him back to normal, and basically keep his powers sealed away. The Supersonic version actually ends up spending quite a few years living a pretty normal life, but eventually does end up getting sealed back into Sonic later on in a couple issues later. This form is pretty crazy to think. I would say that I'm not super interested on when he does eventually lose his powers, as they don't do much with him then, but it's really cool to see what exactly would happen if Sonic did end up losing his mind and end up becoming just basically a psycho killer. And the design is just really cool looking for what it is. It'd be kinda cool to see a modern version of Fleetway Sonic with the swirly eyes, rough skin, and sharp teeth. And this could have even maybe been what Dark Sonic could have become if Eggman actually didn't end up stopping him in Sonic X. But I really like this form, and I think that this is easily an A rank. And the last Super Sonic is the IDW comics, where surprisingly Sonic only goes super once alongside Silver, who finally gets a second opportunity to use his super form, where the only other time we actually have ever seen Super Silver was in 06. But they both end up going super at the end of the Metal Virus arc. The biggest thing that I see people dislike about this situation is just how rushed the ending feels of the Metal Virus arc, where they have this super dark and gloomy build-up to all of a sudden at the end they end up rushing and getting the Chaos Emeralds to save the day. Where a lot of people argued why didn't they just do that to begin with? While I do slightly agree, I don't dislike the ending of this. I love seeing Sonic and Silver team up and going super. And seeing Silver taken seriously again as a character is always amazing, as Silver has genuinely always been one of my favorite characters in the entire series. And even when they do end up teaming up in their super forms, I've always thought that it's really cute that Super Sonic's confidence kinda rubs off on Super Silver. Where Sonic is obviously very cocky and confident, where he'll smack talk to Zavok, Silver actually will end up joining in on the smack talk to Zavok, which is pretty uncharacteristic of him, but I think he's just trying to fit in with Sonic. Not that Silver isn't a little bit confident himself, but I wouldn't say that he's cocky by any means like Sonic is. I'm sure that we will get more of the super forms, but this just happens to be their only appearance so far. Both of them look really good when it comes to their art direction in the IDW comics, and I'm sure that we'll see more of them again very soon. And hell, we haven't even seen Super Shadow yet, so I'm sure that's going to happen sooner than later. But I do like Silver a bit more in this arc. I really like that Super Silver is taken a lot more seriously, where Sonic just kind of feels like the same old to me. So I'll put Silver in A rank and I'll put Sonic in B. Alright, with Sonic all wrapped up, it's time to move on to the other characters in the series that have had super transformations that I have yet to go over with. And of course, leading things off is Sonic's best friend and sidekick in Tails. Now, there are two appearances that I haven't gone over yet for Tails, and the first being Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Where Tails, if you collect all the Chaos Emeralds in the game, can actually not go super like Sonic does. But when collecting all the Super Emeralds, Tails can actually transform into Super Tails. Well, technically, Hyper Tails. Yeah, it's just another one of those confusing things in the Sonic series where in the game it says Super Tails, but this is actually Hyper Tails. But I digress. While Tails just somewhat flashes a brighter color, Tails not only gains the normal hyper form powers of being invincible, faster, but also Tails gets his own unique ability in gaining 4 super flickies that will follow him around. And let me just say that these birds are super busted because these flickies actually have their own hitbox and can end up destroying enemies, or better yet, can inflict hits on bosses. I know we can talk about how broken Hypersonic is, but this is just downright crazy. And it's so fitting for Tails to have flickies follow him around. And I really hope that someday that they'll bring this back for more of a modern design, but also show just how strong Tails can be. If we do, for whatever reason, get a Tails-inspired game, or Tails is more of a playable main character again, I would love to see an ending where he ends up using this form again, as this is by far my favorite version of Hyper/Super Tails. But of course, this is an A rank. But lastly for Tails is his other super form in the Archie comics known as Turbo Tails. Where in the Archie comics, his Tails super form will harness the power of the Chaos Emeralds, where we then see Tails with a red cape, where he looks more like a traditional superhero. What I will say about this form is I like that they tried to do something different with this super form for Tails, but like I've said, I don't really understand why we can't just change Tails' color. Like, what if Tails turned gray or like silver to look more like a silver fox? Like, why does everyone else get a cool color swap for their super forms, but then Tails just gets a cape or ends up just glowing a bit lighter? But Turbo Tails is a step in the right direction, where Tails has some big moments in helping Super Sonic and Hyper Knuckles, or even him teaming up with Super Shadow to send the Chaos Emeralds around the universe to the Special Zone. While this form doesn't make a lot of appearances, I do like the idea that Tails is taken a bit more seriously as a character again, and isn't treated like Sonic's smart little brother that is somewhat kind of useless when it comes to fighting. But I'll put Turbo Tails in B rank. Moving into everyone's favorite red echidna in Knuckles. Where in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, he can achieve his super and hyper forms in the game. While these forms are very similar, they do have some slight differences. Both have a flashing pink design to them that I've always thought looked really good on Knuckles and would really like to see make a return someday. But Super Knuckles has your typical stuff of invincibility and is faster, while Hyper Knuckles gains after images while running, while also being faster along with gaining the power to breathe underwater like Hypersonic. Ultimately, are they that different? Not really. But I am a big sucker for those after images, and I think Knuckles looks really good in this game, so Hyper in A and Super in B rank. But moving into the Archie comics again, where Hyper Knuckles makes a few appearances. Like I mentioned in Archie Supersonic's part of the video, in the early day of the comics, Supersonic and Hyper Knuckles had one of the better fights of the early days of the comics. He also makes another appearance against Mammoth Mogul where we see Hyper Knuckles team up with Turbo Tails and Supersonic. But the last time we actually see him is taking on Hunter, who happens to be a Mobian poacher. Hunter at some point actually ends up capturing Knuckles and even kills his childhood rival in Monk, causing Knuckles to snap into Hyper Knuckles and killing Hunter. And ew, what is this Knuckles design? You know, before this design, this Knuckles is probably an A rank, but I have to knock it down because this design is just awful for Hyper Knuckles. So let's say B rank. For this next one in the Archie comics, let me ask you a question. You ever wondered what would happen if Knuckles was a walking, talking Chaos Emerald? Yeah, me neither. But let me introduce you into Chaos Knuckles, where Knuckles' father Locke experiments on Knuckles before he was born with Chaos energy. This causes Knuckles to turn emerald green, with the idea that Knuckles' father wanting him to become a stronger guardian. While this does grant Knuckles to become stronger, this ultimately leads to his death, where when Knuckles is trying to save one of his family members, unfortunately dies, but is later on reborn into his red self later on, losing his chaos powers. This form is okay. I don't hate the green look, but it's just a really odd form altogether. I swear the early Archie writers had to be on some crazy drugs back on the day to think of this stuff, but I'll put him in C rank. On to Amy Rose. Where besides Superstars, the only other official way to see Super Amy is thanks to the Sonic Origins DLC, Sonic Origins Plus, where Amy becomes playable in the classic games, allowing her to reach her Super and Hyper forms. And at first glance, each of these forms look and perform the same like every other Super form in these games. Your typical stuff of running faster and invincibility, higher jumps, and so on and so forth. But her Hyper form actually does have one big difference that any of the other characters don't have. As when achieving her Hyper form in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, she can actually throw hammers like crazy, destroying anything that comes in contact with the hammers. This is a super cool add-on for Hyper Amy of her having an unlimited arsenal of hammers in her back pocket, and is just genuinely really fitting for this form and a really cool idea. But I'm gonna be that guy again and say she doesn't really look that different besides flashing somewhat of a different color. I think Amy, if anybody that I've mentioned already on this list, should have a different looking color of a super form, considering that she's literally a hedgehog, just like Sonic, Shadow, Silver, and even Scourge. Hell, even Metal Sonic changes yellow, and he's not even a real hedgehog, he's a robot. Why is Amy not getting that same treatment? I think a really cool form would be rose gold, kind of like I said with Knuckles, but why not just have yellow like all the other hedgehogs? She would look really cool as a yellow super form, I think. And Amy is a character that I would like to see taken a lot more seriously down the road, so if they do decide for some reason to give her a super form, they should 100% give her a golden form. But for my rankings in this, I'll put her super form in C rank and her hyper in B. And on to Mr. Edgy the Hedgy, Shadow the Hedgehog, where one of his most iconic super transformations comes from his own game of Shadow the Hedgehog, where Shadow takes on one of his creators in Black Doom, where he ends up learning that Doom was manipulating and controlling Shadow throughout the entirety of the game. With finding this out, Shadow actually decides that he's going to end up protecting Earth and its people as Maria wanted him to. With him making this decision, Black Doom ends up transforming into Devil Doom. But Devil Doom isn't the only one to go under a transformation, as Shadow ends up going super in their final battle of the game. I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion or not, but I actually really liked the fight in the end of Shadow the Hedgehog. Like, it's extremely repetitive, I can accept that, but something about spamming Chaos Spears like an absolute madman has always just been so much fun to me. Especially if you end up filling up the hero gauge in the fight, you can shoot them even faster. This fight is super short, especially if you're gonna spam the spears, but also I Am All of Me is one of my favorite Sonic songs in the entire series. But let me know in the comments how you guys feel about this fight. I guess I've never really looked in to see if that is a hot take or not, if this fight is well received or not. I also understand that it's like super annoying to even unlock this fight in the first place, so I could see that maybe a lot of people just haven't played it. But also, the ending is just so badass of Super Shadow taking the Black Comet and picking it up and then Chaos controlling it to space. It is just so badass and is genuinely one of the most cool looking CGI cutscenes that we've gotten within like the Dreamcast GameCube era of days. I personally have actually always preferred Super Shadow over Super Sonic because of all the chaos power Shadow ends up getting in this form, and this game even solidifies that even more. I will say the one thing I do kind of dislike about this version of Super Shadow is it is way too bright. Like, I feel like I'm getting flashbanged every time he comes close to my screen. Just look at him. But even though he's way too bright, I'll still keep him in A rank as everything else is amazing on him. And finally, the last Archie character in the entire list is Super Shadow. And to be honest, there really isn't too much notable things to say about Super Shadow in the Archie comics. I guess the most notable thing would be his time with Turbo Tails, as I mentioned, or at least in the flashbacks of the events of SA2. He's just rarely ever used in the Archie comics, and I hope in the IDW comics they use him more than they did back then. Though it's hard to get a really good ranking on him, but I'll put him in at least C rank. Next is Super Eggman.
But Mr. GullySama, Eggman has never gone super outside the movies.
Well, that's actually where you would kind of be somewhat wrong. But something I didn't even know existed till about a week ago, to be honest with you, is an official art piece that was made by Sonic Channel in November of 2023, of what is a what-if scenario if Eggman went super and had the power of the Phantom Ruby. In this art piece, we actually can see that Eggman's mustache would turn gold, along with him having the Phantom Ruby on his chest. This is just genuinely a really fun art piece made by Sonic Channel, and now really has me thinking what this would actually look like in a game. But also, it would be really cool if Sonic Channel decided to do more what-if scenario art pieces. It's just kind of a fun thing to theorize or even think about just some different what-if scenarios in the Sonic the Hedgehog series. But I still think that this looks really cool, so I'll stick Super Eggman in B rank. Moving on to our last Sonic 3 and Knuckles super form in Mecha Sonic Mark II. Where in Knuckles' story of the game, Knuckles' final boss is Mecha Sonic. But in this fight, he'll actually jump onto the Master Emerald, charging up and even turning into Super Mecha Sonic, where like Sonic, he turns golden and ends up fighting Knuckles in the final boss. This is the first time a robot in the series has actually gone super, and I have always really loved the ending to Knuckles' story in this game. It's such a cool fight of fighting a super form. However, it does seem as if Mecha Sonic can't maintain this form for super long, as he will lose power after a few attacks and then he proceeds to go back to the Master Emerald to have to charge up all over again. But while in this super form, Mecha Sonic will fly around and shoot energy balls at Knuckles. This fight is pretty easy, to be honest with you, and honestly is kind of repetitive. And this is actually the only time we ever see this form, but Mecha Sonic going super in a mainline game is still just genuinely really cool. So I'll put him in B rank. The last IDW super form is Super Neo Metal Sonic, a long overdue super transformation that to this day I am still shocked that hasn't been in the games to some capacity at this point. But while Neo takes over the Eggman Empire in Eggman's absence, he realizes while Knuckles is off playing hero with the Resistance, he has an easy path to stealing the Master Emerald off of Angel Island. And with doing so, he can actually end up supercharging himself like Mecha Sonic did. So when Sonic and Knuckles arrive, Neo transforms into Super Neo Metal Sonic, who not only has an incredible design of Neo Metal Sonic, but also giving him the golden glow of a super form. This is just so beautiful looking. And also him saying things like, "Come show me what you're made of," just makes this form so nostalgic. And this form is actually just no joke or pushover either. He beats Sonic and Knuckles without breaking a sweat. Well, that is if he can sweat, because you know he's a robot. Anyways, but he is only ever defeated after Shadow ends up sneaking up on him and sticking a Chaos Spear in his chest. But to think that it took Sonic, Shadow, and Knuckles to take down the Super Neo Metal Sonic is pretty crazy to think. And I would really like for them to explore this potentially in the game or even later on in the IDW comics. Metal Sonic is an incredible villain, and this honestly catapulted him into a way better villain as well. This is easily another A rank. And lastly, before we get to our winner, this form is what we talked about a little bit earlier already in the adventure games, and that's Perfect Chaos. As he's only ever able to transform into this form after draining every bit of negative energy from the Chaos Emeralds, leaving them colorless and completely flooding Station Square, while also getting this huge water-based monster form, where he even one-shots Eggman's egg carrier, and is able to shoot lasers from his mouth while doing so. He also has the ability to being able to swim through water at extreme speeds, and overall this is just a really demonic looking form, and it is super fitting for a final boss, especially for an adventure game. But I do wish that he had a few more powers besides shooting lasers and basically just swimming faster, considering how big of a beast and he is running off of all the negative energy of the Chaos Emeralds. It would be a little bit cool if Sega decided to explore this form or go into a little bit more detail of it if we ever got a Frontiers 2, as it seems like all the islanders in Sonic Frontiers do have somewhat of a connection to Chaos and the Chow. But I do think that Perfect Chaos is a B rank, and if you really want me to rank gens, I'll put it right below it, but honestly they're basically the same thing, so I'll just keep him as 1 ranking. Now on to the winner and what super transformation I think is the best. If I haven't made it obvious already, it has to be Super Sonic, Starfall Super Sonic, and Cyber Super Sonic in Sonic Frontiers. Listen, I couldn't make myself split these 3 forms apart. These 3 forms are so good and they all tie into each other somehow. But let's start from the beginning. In the base game, you must collect all the 7 Chaos Emeralds in every island in the game. And then when doing so, you're able to take on each of the titans of that island. And when you get into battle, Sonic will end up using the Chaos Emeralds to transform into Super Sonic, giving him some of the most rawest, most head-banging music the series has ever heard. But also the best gameplay that any boss has ever seen in the entire series. In this game, Super Sonic has 4 Titan fights, and every single one of them is incredible, and each boss fight does not disappoint in gameplay or music. But also, some of the crap that Sonic does in this fight, are you effing kidding me? If you thought Sonic was cocky, confident, and cool, wait till you play this stuff, where Sonic literally becomes as close to a literal anime character as he can get. Stuff like cloning himself to come raining down on a Titan while it's absolutely skewered in the air by these energy beams, to shooting ki blasts from his hands, to impaling Titans into the sky, to throwing Wyvern around like a goddamn ragdoll. Like, are you kidding me? And don't even get me started when he catches Knight's sword and proceeds to slice him in half. Like, the emotions of happiness, excitement, and just straight up hype that I felt for playing this for the first time is truly unmatched. These fights really made me feel like a kid playing Sonic all over again. And then it doesn't even stop there, as when Sega decides to release a DLC, they give Sonic an entirely new form known as Super Sonic 2 or Starfall Super Sonic, where King Coco allows Sonic to access more of his cyber corruption now, giving him a stronger form that has a red outline aura and bright blue eyes. This Sonic is the Ultra Instinct of Sonic. Not only the buildup of Sonic harnessing the power of his cyber corruption, but also the beautiful explosion of when he finally achieves this power up for the first time. To Sonic not giving a damn when he ends up parrying attacks and swatting it away like a fly. To crushing the End Titan by snapping his fingers. I remember playing this back on stream when this first came out and absolutely losing my absolute mind. And this is not even the end of it. After all of this hype stuff that I've already mentioned, you have Eggman pick up a sniper rifle that Sonic goes into where he fully accesses the full power of his cyber corruption, transforming into Super Sonic Cyber, where he turns into a black and blue cyber form where he gets swirly eyes like Fleetway and sharp teeth. To then proceeding where Eggman launches Sonic out of the sniper rifle where he's going so fast that he zigzags around like crazy, where Sonic is then screaming and ripping apart the End Titan. But also the ending of just having Super Sonic passed out with all the scratches and debris all over him floating through space is such a cool moment. Everything from gameplay to bosses to cutscenes to music, literally everything that Sonic Frontiers did with these Super Sonic forms is so good. Like, I don't know how they could ever top this. And if they do somehow do that, I will be absolutely stunned, as I don't think it's possible. But for me, these 3 forms are easily the best super forms that the series has easily ever done. Whew! Well, there you have it. That's my ranking of every single super form in the Sonic series. Let me know what you guys think of my list and what you agree or disagree with in the comments below. But also, let me know what your favorite super form is, or hell, if you're from the future, where would you rank the newest super form from the newest Sonic game? Or did I by some chance somehow miss a super form? Let me know in the comments and where you would rank it. This video was a long time in the making. From a 33-page script that I ended up writing, 4 hours of recording, all of the research and editing that went into this video. I know it's not something I typically ask, but if you enjoyed this video in any way, please drop a like as it does help out a bunch. Or even consider hitting that subscribe button as it truly helps out the channel a lot. And I appreciate you guys enjoying these ranking videos so much as they are a bunch of fun to make and I can't wait to do even more. But with all that being said guys, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace!